Thank you for joining Sports Development Series. We yours truly, Boma Ekiora.
Sports Dev Series is sponsored by Arewa Baobab Fruit Powder, one of the most nutritious substances on the planet. Get your Baobab Fruit Powder from arewabaobab.com.
Sports Dev Series, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me for another session. So, a friend of mine recently sent me an article from The Score, which is a online sports publication. The title of the article was, "Why Does European Soccer Keep Ignoring African Coaches?" It was written by Daniel Ruse. I think it was put out like 8 days ago. And I looked at it before I proceed anyway. Shout out to my man Chiadi for sending me the article. He sent it to me and I ended up reading it. But it was an interesting article, and it essentially, to summarize it, it was kind of saying African coaches in Europe are ignored by European clubs for various reasons. It highlighted FK Tirana's Nigerian coach who rescued the club from relegation in 2020 and brought them up, helped them win the championship. His name is Emmanuel Egbo. He's a former Nigerian goalkeeper. Was a goalkeeper for Nigeria at the Nations Cup, which is the African Cup of Nations. Anyways, he was able to really turn this club around and help them win a title, right? In Albania, which isn't one of the even ranked. I wouldn't rank it in the top 10 European leagues, but he was able to get a coaching job and also turn the club around and do very well. And when you look at it, some of his challenges he highlighted include, the fact that he experienced racism. They thought his intellectual capacity was inferior, but he ignored all of that and kept working hard to try to get that club in the right area. I don't know what the social relations in Albania are for people of color, or Black people for that matter. But he was able to develop a tough skin, coach through, and make things happen. One quick correction: his name is Ndubuisi Egbo, not Emmanuel. So, but his experiences or his drawbacks, the things that he experienced that kind of held him back, were not necessarily job preventing. They seem more social. And again, this is my interpretation just from his comments in the article. And I don't know how much or how owners of clubs view coaches that are African or African descent in Europe. I do know a lot of former players that played in Europe in a lot of different countries end up getting their coaching badges, end up going out there to try to get jobs as coaches. And very few of them land really good jobs. And I'm yet to see any publication or reporter that has really tried to understand the reasons why. When I was in university, I was fortunate enough to work for an institute at the University of Central Florida that dealt with hiring practices of major leagues in the United States. And that was a really good study. It broke down who was hired, how many coaches existed, and helped one really understand whether or not the decisions were made by race and what influenced those decisions. However, in Europe, I haven't seen the equivalent study. I may be wrong, but I haven't seen one. I haven't seen a study done that takes a look at the entire landscape and identifies how many coaches, either of African origin, which essentially means they might have African parentage but were born and raised in these countries, or are Africans that went to Europe to play as professionals and ended up becoming coaches. But they're not very many. You look at the English Premier League, for instance. For a while, there weren't any. And then we did see Patrick Vieira break in with Crystal Palace. I think he had the job for 20 months and he was sacked in March. And you don't really see too many. The Vieira case is interesting because before that, I think he coached in Montreal in the MLS. Was it Montreal? No, it was New York City FC in the MLS. And then he went there. And some people will say, hey, listen, that's part of the coaching world. That's what happens. You coach one place, you get fired, you go to another area. So he gets fired. It'd be interesting to see which other team hires Patrick Vieira. We did see Thierry Henry get a job with Monaco for a short time, and he also got fired. And I think he's in the broadcasting booth now. And we don't know what the root cause is, why these coaches or these former players are not being given an opportunity. Nigerian sports journalist that's very well respected, Oluwashina Okeleji, said he understands and feels the frustrations of African coaches. And his belief is that Walid Regragui and Aliou Cisse. Regragui is the coach for Morocco that took Morocco to Africa's first semifinals in the World Cup. And then Aliou Cisse is the Senegalese coach who won the African Cup of Nations with Senegal. And they've done very well, went to the World Cup and coached. He thinks that those two coaches, as well as South African coach Pitso Mosimane, are some good candidates to end up with European clubs. And as much respect that I have for Okeleji, I don't fully agree with his analysis. I don't know if an African coach that does well on the continent and takes a national team places becomes a candidate for a top European club. Because if that was the case, all the European coaches that had historically coached on the African continent would be getting good European jobs, but you don't see that to be the case across the board. Most of them don't get the top European job. So it's a space that I don't want to come up with any conclusions, or because it's just difficult to know why that is the case. And some have suggested implementing the equivalent of the Rooney Rule, which was done in the NFL, to make it mandatory that a certain number of Black coaches are interviewed for a particular job in Europe. I don't know if that's going to go over too well. Europe does not necessarily have the civil rights history that the United States does. So trying to get it passed as law would be more of a challenge, at least in my opinion. We have seen some African former players that have gotten really good jobs. Sheyi Olufinjana, former Nigerian midfielder, ended up getting a job as a sporting director of Grasshopper Club in Zurich. We saw Michael Emenalo. He was the sporting director with Chelsea, and he ended up going to Monaco. So, we've kind of seen some successes, but it seems like some of these successes are also a function of connections, who you know, and what kind of really good connections you have with different clubs. It could be a lot of different factors. I think the good news as it relates to this is that you do have a lot of upcoming coaches. You have Sunday Olise, who's, of course, coached in Netherlands and is also trying to continue coaching, former Nigerian player. You do have John Utaka, who, is the youth coach for Montpellier in France. He also played in France for several years. You have the likes of Michael Essien, who's working with FC Nordsjælland in Denmark, and all these guys have gotten their coaching badges. Some of them have even gotten UEFA Pro, like Sunday Oliseh, and it becomes a grind, like everything else. So the one thing I will agree with the reporter Okeleji on is that the more of these coaches that get these badges, the more likely you'll see the opportunities open up for them. But it's going to be a process. And when you look at the continent of Africa, there was a ranking done by another magazine called Sport Discovery. They kind of ranked the top 5 best football coaches in Africa. And what you would see is that there's been a paradigm shift. There was a time when you would rank the top best coaches in Africa, not even a decade ago, and all of them will be probably European coaches that have come to settle. You would get a few African coaches, but majority of them would be. But in looking at this ranking today, what you notice is it's predominantly African coaches, and the names in sequential order would be Aliou Cissé, Carlos Queiroz, which I believe may be the only European coach there. You have Otto Addo of Ghana. You have Pitso Mosimane, as mentioned. He's from South Africa, and he's never really coached anywhere else, just in South Africa. And then you have Walid Regragui from Morocco, who took Morocco to. So you see that shift in that some countries are hiring more of their homegrown coaches. Some countries are putting in minimum standards for coaching professionally in the country. You have to have a CAF, which is the Confederation of African Football license, or you have to have a UEFA license to coach. So they're trying to increase the quality of coaches, so people, so the level can grow. And the day these coaches are going to get better jobs. But we'll see. European football is obviously the best in the world, and it's not just African coaches. I don't think you see a lot of North American CONCACAF coaches in European football. There's some. For CONMEBOL, which is South America, you do see a lot more coaches that are from Uruguay or Argentina in particular, coaching in Europe. But it takes a while, and the coaches need to develop. So we'll watch this space and kind of see what happens. But in terms of, European soccer ignoring African coaches, we just have to take a look and see. It's difficult to say. I won't lie to you. It's difficult to say that that's the case. But we do know that as the numbers grow and as the craft improves, you can't ignore everyone, right? Eventually, you're going to have to hire people when they show you what they're made of. So anyway, Sports Dev, thanks for joining me again. We'll tackle another topic. Take care.